And the demo, when I heard the demo, I said, I have to try to sing it so softly.
Hi, I'm Maurice Gibb.
I'm Barry Gibb.
And I'm Robin Gibb, and we're the Bee Gees.
She stopped for half a second, not long enough for anyone to clap, not long enough for the music to restart, just long enough for her breath to catch, and for everyone watching to realize this wasn't going to be a normal performance. Her eyes didn't go to the audience. They went somewhere else, and for a moment, it felt like she was singing to someone who wasn't there anymore. If you care about the real stories behind the music, subscribe to RetroWaves. This channel is built for that. Céline Dion had sung this song dozens of times before, on massive stages, on glossy television specials, in front of crowds who knew every word. But this time, something was different. The lyrics hadn't changed. The melody hadn't changed. She had. And what most people didn't know, what almost no one realized in that moment, was that this song had quietly stopped being a performance years earlier. It had become something else entirely, something she almost never spoke about. When Immortality was first written, it wasn't meant to carry grief. It was meant to feel eternal. The Bee Gees had written it carefully, not as a farewell, not as a confession, but as a statement about connection that survives distance, time, and silence. Céline's voice was chosen because it carried clarity, strength, control, nothing fragile, at least not yet. And for a long time, the song lived exactly the way it was intended to. It was elegant, uplifting, safe. But songs don't stay frozen in the moment they're written. They travel with the people who carry them. And sometimes they wait. Céline never spoke publicly about what the Bee Gees meant to her, not in grand speeches, not in long interviews. There were no dramatic declarations, no headlines, just quiet respect. They worked together. They trusted each other. And in the studio, there was something rare, a feeling that no one needed to explain themselves. Maurice Gibb, especially, had a way of making people feel at ease, not by being loud, not by taking up space, but by listening. Céline noticed that. She always noticed that. Years passed. The song remained. And then, without ceremony, without warning, the world shifted. One day, Maurice was there. And then he wasn't. No long goodbye, no final collaboration, just absence. Céline didn't issue a statement. She didn't rush to the cameras. She did what she always did. She kept going, but something subtle began to change. When she sang Immortality after that, she didn't remove it from her set lists. She didn't retire it. She didn't say it was too painful. Instead, she adjusted. She sang it slower. She held certain words longer than before, almost as if she were giving them time to land. And sometimes, not always, but enough to be noticed, she avoided eye contact with the crowd entirely. No one questioned it. No one thought much of it. After all, singers evolve. That's what people assumed. But that wasn't the part that stayed with her. What stayed with her was a single line, a line that once sounded comforting, a line that promised continuity, a line that quietly turned into a reminder she couldn't escape. We don't say goodbye. At first, it felt reassuring. Later, it felt unfinished. Céline never explained why she stopped introducing the song. She used to talk about it, about the collaboration, about the harmonies, about how honored she felt. Then, without announcement, she stopped. The music would begin, and she would simply sing. No backstory, no smile, just focus. As if explaining it would make it heavier. Behind the scenes, people noticed. Musicians noticed. There were moments when she'd step off stage after performing it and sit quietly for longer than usual. No tears, no breakdown, just silence. And silence, for Céline Dion, was unusual. Years later, when the Bee Gees were spoken about publicly, their legacy framed in celebration and tribute, Céline remained careful with her words. She never said loss outright. She never said goodbye. She spoke about memory, about voices that remain even after they're gone, but she never said whose voice she still heard. By the time another Bee Gee was gone, the meaning of the song had shifted again. What was once shared between many had narrowed. It wasn't about legacy anymore. It wasn't about eternity in theory. It was about one remaining connection and one person still listening. So when Céline walked onto that stage years later, when the lights softened and the first notes began, she already knew something the audience didn't. She knew this wasn't just a tribute. It wasn't just a performance. It was a line she had been carrying for years, waiting for the right moment to finally cross. And that moment came quietly. No announcement, no explanation. Just a subtle shift in her posture, a slight tremble in her voice, and a realization spreading through the room that whatever this song once was, it wasn't that anymore. Because what happened next was never meant to be public. And when she finally stepped forward, away from the microphone stand, away from the safety of distance, she wasn't singing for the audience at all. She was singing to someone. She took a step forward, not because the music told her to, not because the moment demanded it, but because staying still suddenly felt impossible. The microphone remained behind her, still carrying the echo of her last note, but Céline didn't look back. She moved toward the edge of the stage, toward a place she had never rehearsed reaching. And in that single movement, the room changed. The distance between performer and audience dissolved. The air grew heavier, quieter, as if everyone understood, instinctively, that this was no longer a performance they were meant to applaud. It was something else. Barry Gibb stood near the front. He wasn't acknowledging the cameras. He wasn't scanning the crowd. He was completely still, the kind of stillness that arrives when memory doesn't come gradually, but all at once, sharp, vivid, unavoidable. Because Barry knew this song before it ever belonged to the public. He knew where it came from. He knew how it was written. And more than anyone else in that room, he knew who was missing. As Céline continued to sing, the harmonies rose behind her. Not live, not imagined, preserved. Voices untouched by time. Maurice, Robin. They didn't sound distant. They didn't sound like echoes. They sounded present. And suddenly the promise at the heart of the song shifted again. We don't say goodbye. We don't say goodbye. This time, it didn't feel reassuring. It felt unfinished. Céline's voice didn't break, but it narrowed, just slightly, enough to reveal the effort it took to keep control. She didn't close her eyes. She didn't look inward. She kept her gaze steady, fixed on Barry, and sang as if the words were no longer meant to travel outward. They were meant to land. For years, people believed immortality became painful for her the moment Maurice died. That assumption made sense, but it wasn't the full truth. The pain didn't come from the loss alone. It came from what never happened afterward. No final conversation, no moment to redefine the song together, no chance to say what it had become. So she carried it instead, quietly. Each performance after his death added another layer, another silent goodbye, folded carefully into the melody. The lyrics stayed the same, but their purpose changed. They stopped being something she shared freely. They became something she endured. Barry didn't move as she drew closer. His face didn't immediately break into tears. It held that suspended expression, the moment just before emotion finds a way through. When Céline reached the final lines, she didn't push them outward. She softened them, as if volume might disturb something fragile, as if this moment needed to be protected from spectacle. This wasn't a tribute planned by producers. There were no speeches prepared, no cues for applause, no framing. What unfolded had been postponed for years because acknowledging it meant admitting something she wasn't ready to name, that the song no longer belonged to the stage. It belonged to memory. When the final note faded, Céline didn't bow. She didn't gesture to the crowd. She didn't step back into performance mode. She closed the distance between herself and Barry and placed her hand over her heart. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough to be unmistakable. No words followed. They weren't needed. The audience applauded, but gently, carefully, as if instinctively aware that loud celebration would fracture what had just passed between them. But the most important part of the night didn't happen under the lights. It happened after. Backstage, Céline didn't celebrate. She didn't replay the moment. She didn't speak about the performance at all. She sat quietly. When someone asked how she felt, she paused, longer than expected. Then she said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. She said that some songs change without asking permission, that sometimes you don't realize you're saying goodbye until you're already in the middle of it. She never described immortality as grief. She never framed it as mourning. She spoke about it the way she spoke about people she loved deeply but could no longer reach, as if they were still nearby, just separated by something thin and invisible. After that night, her relationship with the song shifted again, not dramatically, not all at once, but noticeably. She didn't avoid it anymore. She allowed it, which was harder than avoidance had ever been, because allowing it meant admitting the truth she had kept quiet for so long. That immortality was no longer about permanence. It was about what remains when permanence dissolves. A voice that lingers, a harmony that survives. A connection carried forward by only one person now. She never dedicated the song publicly. She never spoke Maurice's name from the stage. She didn't need to. The song had already done that work. When it was written, no one could have predicted how precisely it would age, how painfully accurate its promise would become, that voices do remain, that connections do survive, but not in the way we imagine, not whole, not untouched. For Céline, singing Immortality became a conversation that could only move in one direction. She sang, they answered, through memory, through recording, through echo. And that was all there would ever be. That is why she almost never speaks about that performance now. Not because it was too painful, but because it was final. Some goodbyes are spoken, some are avoided, and some are hidden inside melodies, waiting quietly for the moment they can finally be released. For Céline Dion, immortality was never meant to be a farewell, but it became one, not loudly, not publicly, but completely. And once it did, she never sang it the same way again.